Hey fam, welcome to Life More Abundantly, the podcast where we talk Black health like we talk everything else, real, out loud, and with love. I'm Dr. Ebony Haynes.
And I'm Dr. Tanisha Kemi Drennan. We've got a lot to talk about today, so let's get into today's episode.
Righty, let me share with you something that I heard recently that I thought would be interesting to our listeners. So last month, the C.S. Mott Children's Hospital revealed the results from their national poll, and it found that 47% of parents believe that children should never cuss or use swear words, while 35% of parents felt like it depended upon the situation, whether it was okay for their kids to curse.
So wait, is this cursing period or cursing in front of their parents?
This is cursing period.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So in terms of parental reactions, the poll found that when kids curse, 41% of parents tell their kids to stop. 38% of parents explain why they didn't like it. 14% ignore the fact that their kids just cussed. And then only 6% issue a punishment after hearing their kids curse.
Okay. All right.
Yes, it says parents of teens are more likely to ignore swearing. 21% of parents are more likely to ignore their teen swearing compared to parents of younger children, which is 8%.
So I'm just going to say for me and my house and the people that I knew when I was growing up, put it like that. If they ignored us cursing, it was because they never heard it themselves.
Correct. I definitely can tell that this is, and it was a national poll, right? And so it is a cross section of the American population, and I get that. I never get a phone call.
Okay, when I was growing up, they did have the polls in the mall. Like sometimes the people would give you $10 to take that survey. I haven't seen them people. Nobody calls me.
They're more sophisticated now. They're calling, they're texting, but I still don't get a phone call. I still don't get text messages. So no one's asking me my opinion. Let me tell you, my mama, she wouldn't have put up with that.
Right. And so I do see a certain demographic of people that even curse at their moms. Like, Mom, what the? That definitely couldn't happen in my house, and my cousins, and my aunties, and my uncles, and my mama's friends in the neighbor house.
It's not happening anywhere. And you better not even cuss around other folk, right? Other grown people. It's not happening in our community. Do you watch that TV show called Shrinking? Have you ever seen that?
I've seen it. I'm not, but I've seen it.
Well, it's so funny because I remember hearing about this poll as I was starting to watch the series Shrinking. And I remember thinking, this is so timely because the daughter of one of the main characters in the show cusses all the time. And like she's a high schooler.
To the dad, or
she can be talking to him. She could be just talking, in general and using the foul language. It doesn't matter. And he's cool with it. Now, part of it is, I think, because, and not to get real deep in the show,
her mom died.
She lost her mom. He lost his wife, but still, right? Yes, you can still go through your grief, but you're not going to be cussing in my house.
Right. I remember, now this didn't happen in our generation, but I do remember hearing stories of our parents' generation when they used to get their mouth washed out with soap.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So, I didn't get that happen to me, but it wasn't okay. There are two instances that I can remember growing up. Me and my mom were watching a movie. I know I had to be in elementary school, and a character in the movie got killed, and one of the characters was like, "So what? It's a effing kid." And I just remember being so disgusted that he would say that. I repeated it like, "It's just a effing kid." Man, my mom got up calmly. She went and grabbed her choice, and the next thing I know, I was catching it. Like, I don't care if it's in a movie or not. You don't get to say that. And another time, we can't say this word even on a podcast. This girl, I got in a fight in high school, and this girl was like, "I heard you call me a bitch," and I'm like, "I don't even know what you said. I don't even know you. Like, who are you?" And I was like, I'm telling you, I didn't call you a bitch. And she punched you in my face, man.
What?
We tore that hallway up. Do you hear me? And I could not let her go until every which way from Blues, because she had punched me in my face. Anyway, when I came home and I retold the story exactly as it happened, my mom was like, "Why are you repeating that word?" Right? Like, we didn't say
stay focused.
You thought it. You were thinking. And she like, "No, we need to talk about why do you feel the need to repeat it? It's other ways you could say what she called you without actually saying the curse word. Like, who you cussing at? Nobody. I'm the So no, girl, no. So I think definitely that we may, of course, back to my opinion, but my opinion is that we have to set boundaries with our children, because then what you want me doing next? Cursing in school, cursing out the teacher, cursing out your boss. Like, you just can't. No, stop. Like, if you gotta be 21 to drink, 16 to drive, 18 to vote, which all these numbers are ridiculous that they come in stages. I think the 18 to curse, period. But in my house, you gotta be 65. I don't know.
I know that's right. We have a grandson who loves to say, "What the?" He doesn't finish it. It's just, the what the, and it drives me crazy. You thinking it. Right. And if I wasn't here to hear you, if I was not within earshot, you would have said it. So every time he does it, I'm always on him. You don't say that. You just can't say that, because what's the logical next step? It is to say the whole phrase. So no, we're
who
trying
told
to.
You it was okay to even say that part?
Exactly. So we're trying to curb that behavior now, so that it does not become a problem later.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Like, I don't know. And I think also, part of it is, as you're bringing out in this show, that these kids are seeing this behavior on TV and it's not getting bleeped out. They're hearing these words in lyrics, right? That are not getting bleeped out. And that then, what do they say? Art imitates life, and life imitates art. They're imitating not just what their friends are doing, but they're seeing it in everywhere they go, and they're thinking it's okay. Not even paying attention to a lot of times that language isn't even being used in their homes. So I know in my home and in your home, we're not using that language, but the kids, they are. So.
Oh yeah. And although I'm way grown at this point in my life, and I don't live with my mother or my father.
Right.
Okay.
Not saying it. And I'm not going to say I don't cuss, because I know a lot of my friends is like, hold up. But I will say, like, I curse in humor sometimes, or, you know what I mean? I don't curse people out. I have, matter of fact, I, even talked to my niece and my nephew about that. I don't curse people out. I don't curse at people. And yeah, I still don't cuss in front of my mom.
Yeah, I think I got a little high-spirited one day and, was in a heated exchange with my mother. This probably was about 10 years ago. And, because I feel like I'm way grown. I'm in my own house right now. I feel like I can say what I want to say. My mom calmly was like, "I am still your mother."
Right.
Like, oh, let me get back in my place. Let me get back in my place.
Right. Yeah. You was probably shook a little bit too. Like, what's about the? Oh, okay. Right. I'm an adult. Okay. Let me pull back. That's so funny to say that. I remember an instance with my mother and my grandmother, and they was arguing, and I got bad and was like, "You're not going to keep talking to my mother like that." And my grandmother turned to me and she cussed. She was like, "You say another word to me, I'm going to knock you on your ass." I turned to look at my mom. My mom had gone down the hallway and was in a different room.
Like, I don't want no parts of that.
Right. Ain't no point in both of us getting knocked out. What I'm going to do? Thanks, Mom. And then you remember in Love and Basketball, when Sanaa Lathan's character was like, "And you was doing such and such, washing daddy's damn shorts." And she was like, "Alfred, what it was like? They cussing their mamas in Spain?"
That's what they do over there? Okay.
That's what we do over here.
Correct.
So again, I definitely think there's a demographic of people, who are less tolerant of cursing children.
All right, T. So what else do we need to talk about today?
We cannot be in Black History Month or on this podcast without talking about Jesse Jackson's death last week. Yes. The Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson. He died on February 17th, 2026, after a remarkable civil rights legacy and journey. I remember being a little girl, and I hope she still has it somewhere because, my mom keeps everything. But she came home from a conference, wherever she was, and had a sign, an autographed picture of Dr. Jackson when he was running for president. And she was like, "Here, I got this for you." And I was like, "I don't want that." And now I'm so glad that she has it and hate that I didn't appreciate it, as most children don't do at the time. But I certainly hope it's around here somewhere as part of important Black history memorabilia.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw Reverend Dr. Jackson at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference a couple years ago. And he was there with Reverend Jeremiah Wright. And it was just amazing. Although his health was not the best, he still felt that it was important to be out at the conference and engage with people. So this was really just something else. You knew it was coming, but you still don't expect it when it happens.
Of course. And I feel like at least we, had the proper anticipatory grief, as we would call it in my field, because we knew it was coming, kind of could prepare ourselves. Like the two phrases that will always stay in my mind are "I am somebody" and "keep hope alive." And if he didn't do anything else in this journey, he taught us that, right? And then, of course, the Rainbow Push Coalition is still existent to this day, and it's still doing meaningful work in Chicago and in this country. One of my favorite memories is when that young man was abducted overseas, and it was only Jesse Jackson that could get on a plane and go bring him back to the United States. It was so random. Like, how Jesse Jackson get him by?
Of all people, right?
Of all people. But he was able to do that as an international ambassador for peace and for liberty. So that's also an amazing legacy.
I'm just really inspired too by the fact that he embraced all of who he was, the messiness of his birth, and the fact that he would be what society would call an illegitimate child, right? Of a teenage mom and a married man. Then his mom married and his stepfather adopted him. And so he took on his adopted father's name. But he also then embraced the fact that he had two fathers. He maintained that relationship with both men. And he never allowed that to be something that would disgrace him. He embraced it and he used it to fuel his work in communities and help people recognize it really doesn't matter what your background is, that you can accomplish whatever it is that you want to accomplish. But we also should be fighting for those people, the people that we often don't think about, the people that we shun because maybe they were a teen mom or what have you. But no, we need to embrace all of them. We should be fighting for the rights of those people as well.
And, throughout the years, he showed that he still is a flawed human being, and to embrace that and to acknowledge that with all the things that went on, in his family, it's important as well. But it did not diminish the work that he did and continued to do ultimately until he died, including, his educational accomplishments, of course, earning his BA from North Carolina A&T State, and then going on to earn his Master of Divinity from Chicago Theological Seminary. Not sure where he earned his DMin, or was it honorary or not, but he definitely had doctorate credentials with him. And then, of course, we all will remember another point in Black history when he was at the election and inauguration of President Barack Obama. Now those tears streamed down his face, full of emotion. I'm sure that he felt and was exemplifying what we all felt on that night, which was extreme pride and gratitude that kind of the dream had been realized, if you will. And all their hard work had paved the way. We certainly, even to this day, and Barack Obama, I'm sure, has said this many times, we stand on their shoulders and their sacrifices.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that he actually transferred from a predominantly white institution, a PWI, to North Carolina A&T and HBCU. And he was very engaged in the civil rights movement during that time, participating in sit-ins and rallies and that kind of thing. And I think sometimes we forget, we get so caught up in what our world is like today that we forget that there were times when it was very difficult to be a Black person on a predominantly white institution's campus. And so oftentimes those HBCUs, and even today, the HBCUs continue to be places of affirmation for our people. And so a lot of who he is, I think, can be attributed to the fact that he had that HBCU experience and he was able to really participate and lean into the movement, the civil rights movement at the time, and have policies changed within that local community, and then other communities recognize we can do this in Greensboro, then we can do this all across the country. So I appreciate that. And I don't remember his show on CNN called Both Sides with Jesse Jackson, but it ran for a long time. It's really cool to know that he also, achieved that level of, unfortunately, we might call it this credibility with these networks for him to have a show on CNN. But, that was a big deal. And I think that it allowed also, people from lots of different demographics to really see who he was and what he was about. And I think that even that we can say has contributed to the advancement of the Black race that we saw, especially leading up to President Obama's
and even
election.
seeing, Black men as anchors on news networks and especially CNN for sure. I was smiling when you said, I don't remember. Girl, we was in high school and college. But so glad that he had his show and that's what had happened.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, so we honor his legacy and his memory, and we express our gratitude for everything that he contributed to the advancement of Black and brown people.
And the sacrifices of his family, because no one leads alone. Their families have to commit to being in the fight too. And so we're really grateful to the family for their commitment and their sacrifice.
All right. Well, I think as we continue in Black history, what's going on with this week in Black history?
So interestingly, this week, Trayvon Martin was killed back in 2012. So on February 26th of 2012, he was killed, as you all know, by George Zimmerman. And Trayvon Martin would have turned 31 this week. So definitely a life, cut down way too soon over a senseless act of violence, racially motivated violence, no matter how you look at it.
Wow, definitely, I can't eat a pack of Skittles really without reflecting. He had a hoodie on and was eating some Skittles, minding his own business, which even still today, we just most of the time are minding our own business as Black people, skipping along, listening to our music, eating our favorite snack, and colonizers find a way to feel threatened by us being joyful and minding our business.
That's right.
But such a tragic ending to this young man's life. George Zimmerman was charged and tried, but unfortunately, a jury of his peers acquitted him of second-degree murder and manslaughter in July of 2013. Did spark outrage and really protests across the country. I do believe that kind of sparked the Black Lives Matter movement.
That's right.
Because it just was like, our lives don't matter. Even our young boys' lives don't matter. Even in a court of law, we don't matter when the evidence is starkly against them.
I was so floored when I heard about this, but in 2019, for those of you who don't know, this man, George Zimmerman, actually had the audacity to file a lawsuit against the Martin family and others in the amount of $100 million on the grounds of false evidence and abusive process. I mean, seriously, dude? So yes, but that's not it. Like, he has been very litigious since then. After that, he tried to sue Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren as well.
For what?
February 18, 2020, Zimmerman filed a defamation lawsuit for $265 million against Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, and then a year later, it was dismissed.
I don't live in Florida. I've never lived in Florida, but taxpayers' dollars at waste for these frivolous suits, right? Even though it's civil court. And then the trauma for the Martin family of losing your son, of seeing subsequent murders happen despite the Black Lives Matter movement starting, and then to have to defend yourself in some type of way in a civil court proceeding by the man that murdered your child.
Make it make sense. Yes. So, we bring this up because so often people forget about things that happened in the past and the subsequent actions, and we just kind of move on with life. But it's important, I think, for us to remember Trayvon Martin because Zimmerman's acquittal was really what sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. And like you said, and that Black Lives Matter movement really does still hold significance for us today. We see Black Lives Matter protesters, activists out during the George Floyd incident and Breonna Taylor, right? And there are just so many names that we could call.
Too many names.
And that's a significant piece of Black history that we cannot forget. And then also we recognize the need for us to stay vigilant, right? So part of George Zimmerman's defense was that he was standing his ground. He was defending his space. He was defending this neighborhood. And we have to do everything that we can to make sure that we are part of the process of making new laws. So that means that we have to vote. Number one, we have to vote the right people into office, but then we have to be willing to step up and say, I'd be willing to participate in the political process, be voted into office so that I can draft legislation. I can do these things to make sure that my experience, my community's experience, my people's experience are reflected in the laws that we have in our land. And so I would encourage people to use these experiences to stoke the flames that may be deeply embedded in them so that they step up and say, you know what, send me. I'll be willing to represent our community and try to turn things around.
Absolutely. When you say that we have to vote even when it feels like our vote doesn't matter. But we also have to do the due diligence, right? A lot of times we are just guilty of getting to the polls and just voting straight Democrat or going with a gut feeling.
Agreed.
But we really need to do the research on the people who are running and find out what their policies are, what they stand for, not just their little snippet when they come to the church and have 2 minutes. But you know what I mean? You really need to investigate what their track record has been, as well as, what are they promising? Because we can't hold these people accountable for the promises they made if we don't know. If we don't know what they're promising, if we're just, just picking random people on the ballot. And then when you talk about, we have to remember, because a lot of times in our communities, we feel like the progress is that we can live predominantly where we want to live. We can eat where we want. We can go on vacation. We can drive where we can drive, right? But social justice wise, right? We're not making strides the way that we ought to be because we have Black Lives Matter. But like you said, I mean, this started in 2013 with Trayvon Martin, and we have dozens of people who have been murdered senselessly, even while this movement has been going on, even as worldwide recognition has occurred and other countries are standing with us, it's still occurring. And oftentimes it seems without consequence. And there are still a lot of things we don't even get to the bottom of. Like, we still don't know what happened truly to Sandra Bland. Like, it's just still things that we are not fully getting transparency on. And see, in my opinion, part of the issue is that when our parents' generation, quote unquote, arrived, right, they stopped telling the stories of dogs being sicked on people for sitting at Woolworth counters. And, we learned these things and other things like we talked about last week about the Black Panther movement and all the social good that they did. We somehow got snippets of this history, but it was not taught and embedded in us in our home. And we cannot rely on other people the government, schools to teach our history. We have to teach it all. Now we're on this kick where we teach about us coming from kings and queens and all of that. That's very important. Right. But we also have to teach what the struggle has been on this land and what it continues to be. And then, as you say, hopefully that inspires people not just to vote, but to get involved and say, here I am, Lord, send me.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because actually this past week, one of our listeners gave me a call, and during the course of the conversation, she said that she was so appreciative of the fact that we do have this Black History segment, because the things that we were bringing up each week were things that she did not know. And, she's 50. And so when you think about the fact that there is so much history, we can't cover it all in this show. Like, we're picking and choosing what we bring up, in the interest of time. But there's so much. But the other thing that I think is important for people to recognize, and that I had to share with this person, because, she was really feeling some kind of way about the fact that she didn't know these things. And I would just say to that, it's impossible for anybody to know everything about Black history, about any topic, right? We don't know everything, and we were exposed. So I'll share that my mother was a stickler for me knowing my Black history. And so when I was young, I had to sit in front of the TV and watch Eyes on the Prize. I remember being so upset with my mom for literally making me do this. And I didn't appreciate it. Like you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Jesse Jackson, like not having that appreciation when you're younger. That is age appropriate, right? And so you can't beat yourself up for that. All of that was something that I was forced to do because my mother felt it was necessary. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it was necessary because my family experienced some atrocities at the hands of white individuals. And we'll definitely talk some more about that in another episode. But because our family experienced some things, there was definitely that recognition that we must educate. And so me and my cousins, some of the most militant people you probably will meet, because that was our family story. We had to hear the stories. And so not all families had that, because, it's traumatic. Reliving those stories for many families is traumatic. And so it's understandable that maybe your family members, your parents did not impart that knowledge because it was really hard for them to talk about. But my thing is, when we know better, we do better.
We do better because we can pick up a book now.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so easy now. You can get videos on YouTube. You can pick up a book. You can, make the decision to go to your local library when they have a guest speaker coming in and talking on a particular topic. Like, it's just so easy, despite the federal government's efforts to try to erase our history. Correct. Right. And kudos to, the legal system for making the administration put the Black History exhibit back up in Philadelphia. These fights will be fought in the court, but also in school districts. And so when you know that your school district, like you mentioned earlier, is not going to educate your kid, you have to take on that responsibility. Our churches have to take on that responsibility. Our Black organizations have to take on that responsibility. Absolutely. Yeah. We shouldn't have to, but at the end of the day, it is still our responsibility to just make sure our kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews and everybody in our community know their history. They don't have to know it all, but they just need to know their histories.
But yes, we are doing our part.
We're trying to do our part.
So yeah. And hopefully, we have some nods and amens, and some people who's like, let me order something and read up on somebody about our history. Not just Martin Luther King Jr. All right. So we get off that soapbox. What's up in our community calendar?
So it was really hard for us to identify the topics that we would cover over the few weeks that we have this month. However, I think we cannot not mention the fact that this is Cancer Prevention Month. Correct. So let's talk about it.
So first of all, we want to acknowledge that cancer affects nearly every family in some type of way, whether it be even just a scare or an actual diagnosis. I don't think in this modern era we can say that we live in a culture where we don't know someone who has been affected by cancer in some type of way. So we want to talk about prevention today, which doesn't mean fear. It means empowerment. It doesn't mean claiming something. I know in the spiritual realm, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to claim that. Well, we're not claiming anything,
right?
But we still want to make sure that we are taking the necessary steps for preventative care. Prevention is about progress, not about perfection, right? So you might not do all the things all the time, but the fact that you're taking some steps, it matters. So we want to talk about that.
And I think that the average person, when they think about cancer prevention, they think about the things that they hear on the news all the time, or they hear on TV all the time. They think about physical activity and nutrition. There is a reason for that. There are so many research studies that have been conducted that show that there is a clear correlation between the amount of physical activity that you receive and the things that you put in your body, the food that you consume, that there is a clear correlation between that and cancer. And so when you think about the fact that of the 10 leading causes of death, your nutrition is linked to the majority of them, that should cause you to think differently about what you put in your body and what your risk of death is.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you bring that up. We hear it. It's like, beating a drum over the head with nutrition and exercise. And some of us still don't, take it to heart. I'm a little bit guilty of that as well. So I'm so glad that you brought that up because, a lot of us, we hear it over and over again, and we're still not compliant. As we said, we're not going to do all the things, but we need to do some of the things. But definitely in terms of cancer prevention, that helps as well. Now, I can hear it already. I don't eat, I don't drink, I exercise, and I still got cancer. So we're not saying these things are 100% foolproof, but we're just saying that they help the process. And God forbid, even if you do, if you are succumbed to an actual diagnosis, the recovery process is a lot better if you start out from a quote unquote healthy platform, right? So, we just want to make sure that we're doing those things. Lowering inflammation is a deterrent to hormone-related cancers. And so there are a lot of us living with untreated inflammation in our bodies. We joke about we can predict the weather with our joints, right? Well, that's because you have inflammation, just things like that. And I hear a lot of people, again, in our parents' generations, like, oh, mama and daddy, they ain't have all this stuff. Well, mama and daddy knew how to grow some things in the garden.
In the backyard.
They took a lot of natural remedies versus these medicines. They didn't have pesticides in their food, and they walked.
Right.
They walked. Even when buses came out, they still walked. I remember my grandmother was like in her 70s walking from West Philly to downtown and back like it was nothing. I'm like, if I walk right now down to the mailbox, I'm going to be tired. And please don't think I'm bragging about that. I'm thoroughly ashamed. But, it was just a different type of lifestyle than we have now. And so we need to be cognizant of that.
I love that you bring up the fact that our lifestyle is different. Technology has changed for us, right? And we have to recognize that with technology comes this more convenient lifestyle. So I remember before microwaves came out, right?
Yes.
So you had to cook all of your food. And so the introduction of the microwave, while it's a great invention, it also has contributed to our lack of cooking actual foods. And so now we are reliant a lot more on things that are processed, things that we can put in the microwave, which for, a family that has a parent who's doing the best they can, but maybe working 2 jobs to support their family, the microwavable meal has saved them. And so we don't want to negate that, but we also have to recognize that microwavable meals are processed foods. And so, they have been stripped of a lot of their nutrients. They may have preservatives like lots of salt. Salt is a preservative. And what impacts our blood pressure? Salt. And so we have to recognize that while technology has been great for us, the invention of vehicles means that people don't walk as much anymore. There are whole cities that are vehicle dependent. And so what does it mean to be in a vehicle dependent community? It means that nobody's walking. And then if you live in a community that doesn't have a sidewalk, you're more than likely not going to walk. I mean, the research has proven that. All of those things are the easy ways, the simple ways that people can get physical activity. And so for us, we have to be clued into that so that we also know how to advocate. So when we go to our county commission meetings, when we go to our, even our school board meetings, like we should be advocating for more opportunities for us to be more physically active and our kids to be more physically active in the spaces that are created for us. So we should take ownership and advocate for those things in our local community.
And I'm so glad that you brought up about children, because as you were speaking, I was thinking that it starts early on, right? I think that we probably have the highest child obesity rate of ever. And, up into our generation, and I will even say well, my son is young, but my niece, nephews, your kids still played outside. And so we hated when the street light was coming on and, we had to come inside and our parents had to call us to come eat and all this kind of stuff. We stayed outside. We rode bikes. We ran. We roller skated. Yes. All of these things that were very, it was a healthy lifestyle, kept us very physically active without the monotony of doing the same thing over and over. When we were growing up, every kid wanted a bike. Nobody was like, nah, I want no bike. Now, these kids are barely outside. And even with that, the motorized skateboards and motorized cars and all this kind of stuff for kids where they don't have to do physical activity.
And so before we get off that topic, one thing I will say in terms of physical activity, you should be getting 30 minutes of physical activity 5 days a week if you are an adult. That is the recommended amount of physical activity. And it needs to be physical activity where you actually sweat, right? You're building up a sweat. So if you out here and, you might just be out for a nice, easy stroll, that's not enough. Right? You need to be getting your heart working. If you are trying to make sure that your child is getting the right amount of physical activity, it should be an hour every day for 5 days of physical activity where they too are getting their heart rate up, they're sweating. That is the recommended amount of physical activity. And then nutrition, you just need to make sure that you are putting the right things in your body. More whole foods, right? More whole foods, not a lot of sugar, not a lot of...
Remember we used to have a pyramid? I don't even think they use the pyramid anymore.
Child, especially not with this administration. They just did an inverted pyramid something, which the food pyramid was already, for me,
but they said it was flawed, but it was visual.
Generally correct, because you had some lobbyists from different industries, the cattle industry and others involved in that process, which I've always fought at USDA for that. But anyway, we'll talk about that another day. But, at least it provided a really good example of what we should be consuming. This new inverted pyramid that Robert Kennedy Jr. and his folks have put out, it's confusing to people, right? It doesn't really give you a sense of, how much of the things that they have on there you should be consuming. It's a lot more complex. And, generally the average person doesn't look at that anyway, right?
Well, no, I'm just saying we go back to education.
Yeah.
In schools, you used to see it sometimes on commercials, And like you said, it was flawed, but at least you had an idea. So, okay. So let's break down the pyramid.
So if you have lots of color on your plate, that's a good thing, right? Lots of color, because most of your color is going to come from your vegetables and fruits and things like that. And you need to make sure that you're paying attention to your portions.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say this. I recommend everybody connect with a nutritionist. Everybody. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are, what your body composition is. You may think that you're in the best shape, best health physically. You too still need to talk to a nutritionist so that you can, really determine what is optimal for your body. You need to know what causes inflammation for you, because what causes inflammation for you may be different than what causes inflammation for me.
Excellent point.
Yeah. And we just talked about how inflammation is something that contributes to cancer. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that.
Right. And for many who do have health insurance, a nutritionist and a dietitian is covered.
That's right.
Just want to put that out there as well. All right. So as we move through, also, everybody knows smoking is bad. It leads to multiple cancers, lung, throat, bladder, pancreatic. It also contributes to emphysema. Secondhand smoke matters too. Quitting benefits most people almost immediately. And so that's very important. I know I've heard definitely that vaping affects the lungs horribly, but I'm not sure about the cancer statistics of vaping and of cigar smoke, but just realizing smoking is bad, right? It's just bad.
On smoking, I've heard people say, I'm not going to quit smoking because if I quit smoking, I'm going to blow up. I'm going to gain a lot of weight. Trust me, the impact of the smoking is going to harm your health more than any natural weight gain that you would have, right? Especially if you are putting the right things in your body. If you're eating healthily, then you're going to be okay, even if you do gain weight. But the tobacco use is definitely going to be more detrimental to you than the weight gain.
Sure. And there are many smoking cessation programs available now as well. And most of the time, if you are fortunate enough to have health insurance, those programs are covered by your health insurance.
Yes, sir.
We want to make sure that we're aware of alcohol and its contribution. Oh, yeah. Can't smoke, can't drink with all the stress. Okay, I digress. We're not going to talk about that, but even small amounts can raise breast and liver cancer risk. So I'm not going to encourage absolution, but I am going to encourage moderation or reduction. If you feel like, or people in your life are telling you drink excessively, then definitely you want to cut back.
That's good.
And then we talked about weight, but I want us to link it to weight and metabolic health. Obesity in and of itself is linked to at least 13 types of cancer.
And you can look healthy, but on the inside, your body is saying a totally different thing. You cannot just look at someone's appearance and determine that just on their appearance alone that they are living a healthy lifestyle or that their body is healthy. That is not the case.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
What else? In our communities, we don't think about when it comes to cancer prevention.
Screenings. Oh my goodness. I can't tell you. I think we mentioned this in another show. How many times people are like, oh, I don't want to get my breasts squished in these mammograms. Well, again, prevention, right? What's the old adage in our community? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of
cure.
And so to get a mammogram, as uncomfortable as it may be, is less uncomfortable than stage 4 cancer. And I've actually known people who, if they had caught it earlier, the type of cancer they had could have been cured, but they waited and waited and waited. Same thing with colonoscopies. We know that colon cancer, especially in African American communities and prominent figures, has really been on the rise. And so, I hear a lot of men say, oh, I don't want nothing stuck up my butt. Well, sir, you're going to be more uncomfortable if you have rectal cancer.
Right.
And so these things, as women, the next one is getting a pap smear, HPV testing for cervical cancer. Sir, it is not comfortable, for us to get a pap smear,
but we do it
because it's necessary. And so even women, making sure that you get your colonoscopies on a regular. And if you feel like something is off, say something. Because a lot of times, especially with mammograms, right, they say you couldn't get them till you were 35 or 40. But if you feel like your body is off, as we talk about almost in every episode, you have to advocate for yourself that we need to get these things checked. If you are genetically predisposed to cancer in your family, then you want to make sure that you're getting not only your annual checkups, but more frequently. I have a friend who almost every woman in her family has had to be treated for breast cancer. And so she doesn't get a mammogram once a year. She goes every 3 months. And so as uncomfortable as that is, she makes sure that she gets that done so that if, God forbid, she also is diagnosed, it can be caught and detected very early on. And the same thing, I have a friend who all the men in his family ended up having colorectal cancer. He goes and gets his checked every 6 months. Is it comfortable? No. But could it save his life? Absolutely.
It's
Same
so
thing for
important.
prostate cancer, getting your skin checked.
Good one, especially for Black communities.
For Black communities, right? We used to be like, especially dark-skinned people would say, oh, we don't need sunscreen. Well, you do, because even Black people get skin cancer. You know, we don't hear about it as often, but it happens. I was surprised of all the years of knowing that Bob Marley died early to find out he died of skin cancer. And skin cancer on his big toe. And so that could have been prevented by sunscreen, which is a good point that you need sunscreen all over your body, but also that the vanity to me of it, that he refused to have his toe amputated, which could have saved his life. Now, do I want any of my limbs amputated? Absolutely not. But, you know, I also need to be aware of life-saving benefits of better lifestyle, screening, and appropriate treatment.
So this has, I think, been a really rich discussion, and we cannot underscore enough the need for screening, the need for regular checkups, the need for second opinions, the need for vaccinations, right? There are vaccines that help to prevent HPV and hepatitis B, and even for our teenagers. Like parents, you should not be afraid to allow your child to go get an HPV vaccine because they're not sexually active. Do it, right? Because you probably won't know when your kid becomes sexually active. Let's just be real.
My mama still think I'm a virgin. I got a kid.
Yes. So go ahead and take advantage of the HPV vaccine, the hepatitis B vaccine, all the vaccines that are out there to help us reduce our cancer risk.
Absolutely. Small steps, right? We always we've talked about that lots of times, small steps. So maybe you can't do 30 minutes of exercise, but can you do 10? Can you, add a green vegetable to your plate if you're a smoker? Can you try and decrease it on your own, all of those types of things. What can you do right away? And then I also would like to encourage all of our listeners, schedule as soon as you finish liking and sharing this episode. Could you please schedule some type of screening? I like to do my female screenings every year around my birthday. So that way I don't forget when I'm supposed to get them done. I know annually this is part of my birthday regimen before I jet ski off to the island, eat all the things I'm not supposed to eat, have all the toast. I get my screenings done. And so that's part of the whole birthday ritual for me. But please, just schedule one screening, especially in our community. We hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not looking for trouble. I'm not trying to, bring nothing into existence. I'm not claiming nothing. It's not about that. It's just about being preventative. That's all. And I think also we could do it together. Maybe you and your friend, maybe you and your sister, your mom, your dad. Let's go together and get it done.
Great point. I love it. I mean, y'all go to the nail shop together.
That part. Let's go make sure we're healthy together.
That's right. Cool. All right, T. That has been a very rich conversation. So what's on tap this week for our herbal tea segment?
So first up, let's talk about Michael Jordan and this video that has been circulating around where he is seen physically tapping on a young boy's behind. And so when I first saw all of the comments and the videos, I immediately saw people saying, oh, I got to return all my Jordans, which
you can't do anyway. Come on now.
You can't do. But there's been a longstanding issue, a debate about the Jordan line of apparel, but people were like, oh, now we need to boycott Jordan, and just all of the negative connotations, like, oh, don't let me find out he on Epstein Island, like all the things relating this to or correlating this to pedophilia, right? And then I saw an article, ironically, on social media, and so the article speaks about the context of the actual video and how we are so quick to jump on the bandwagon and basically of cancel culture And the context of the video is that after games, Gatorade and ice and all this kind of stuff are poured on individuals. And that young boy was Michael Jordan's co-owner's son. And so ice had gotten down his shirt and in his shorts. And Michael Jordan, according to this observer, was trying to help him get the ice out of his back and out of his short. And so the writer of this post was saying we have to look at things in the full context. And so I think that's important. I don't know actually what happened in that moment, but I think looking at the context is so important, especially in this era of cancel culture and how one 20-second snippet in any of our lives could be distorted. If that's the case, it could reflect reality, but it also could reflect the distortion because people don't understand the context. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we are in a space now where we have to be digitally and media literate. That is a thing, right? To be literate in these spaces so that you don't get drawn into the trap of, I saw this 15-second video, grainy video online. And so now everybody's taking this and running with it, whatever their thoughts are about it, their opinions are about it, not fully understanding the picture of what's going on. And so we have to be better about, how we engage social media, how we communicate about things that we see online, and really just take a moment to stop and pause and say, what if this was me, right? What if this was my family? How would I want people to, engage with this content? So yeah, I think we have a responsibility to not only develop our digital and media literacy, but we also need to impart that to our kids. So helping them to recognize not only how important it is for them to be able to see content and interrogate it, ask questions about, what we're seeing, but then also to educate them on how to create content and what are the long-term, responsibly, and what are the long-term consequences of their actions if they are really just trying to get likes and, the reshares and trying to get their subscribers up, right? There is a way to do that where you are a responsible citizen in the U.S.
I think that's a great point because even when you're speaking about being literate, I started thinking about the fact that by the time I saw the video, all of the comments had been out there. But then when I actually saw the video, I started dissecting in my mind, would Michael Jordan be fondling a young boy in public in a stadium full of people with his parents standing right there, with a white boy with his parents standing right? Like, would Michael Jordan be doing that? Is this really pedophilia? It's something else, right? But without even reading the context, something else has to be going on here because this just does not make sense. And so being literate, being conscious, being thinkers, right? Our parents used to tell us about thinking about stuff before we doing it or before we do it or react to it. So being critical thinkers. And I think clickbait and social media has stopped us from being critical thinkers. And so we have to put that hat back on and just be reflective. What could be going on? Let's evaluate all of the scenarios before we actually try and tear down someone's legacy, right? And then the second part I love that you brought up is about being responsible content providers, right? Like, what was your intention? Right? We talk about this a lot. What is your intention? So what was your intention in recording this moment and then posting it? Now, you could abdicate responsibility and say, well, I just posted it. What people thought about it was their own. But what was the even point of posting it without the context? Right? So we have to be careful about what we post and making sure that we're putting the appropriate context in if we want to be responsible social media journalists.
Absolutely. That is our responsibility. So yeah, I love that. All right. So topic number 2.
Oh, girl. Topic number 2. We can't be on here and not talk about Miss Tyra Banks, supermodel.
Yes. So I don't know how many people have watched the Netflix documentary on America's Next Top Model.
Can I just say Netflix got all the tea right now?
All the tea. They do. They do. They are locked in. I love it. So let's talk about America's Next Top Model. So let me just say this. I used to watch it. I probably watched maybe about 4 or 5 seasons, and I like the show. And some of the things that drew me to the show were, the fact that Tyra Banks sought out to ensure that the industry recognized that beauty comes in lots of different forms and colors and all of that. And so just like I really believed in this show, I think so many other people did as well. I actually saw an interview that Eva Marcel did recently where she talked about her reactions to the documentary.
And she was not a part of, right?
She was not a part of it. And so that, also raises questions about, well, why wasn't she included in this documentary? Especially since she by far has been the most famous Black model to have won.
And successful.
Right.
Sure.
So anyway, but even not being included in the documentary, what I heard during this interview just stunned me. What do you mean that there was sexual violence during one of the seasons or 2 seasons, I guess, because, the women had to get, for example, Brazilian waxes, and none of them had ever done that before. And it was a requirement. And so if you don't do it, then could that be considered sexual violence? Right? I think people can make an argument that that's sexual violence. But the episode of sexual violence happened with a young lady who was raped. If a person cannot consent to having sexual intercourse with someone, it's rape, period. There's no question about that. And this young lady was drunk and had passed out, and then she was violated. And the other young ladies, the cameramen, the sound people, everybody on the set knew it, and they did nothing about it. And then this woman had to make the phone call to her boyfriend saying that, she couldn't even say that she was raped. She said that she had sex basically with somebody else. And to deal with the agony of her boyfriend saying, how could you do this? Right. Why would you do this? He called her a bitch right during this call. And the camera
and all of this is aired.
Are there, and even they apologize to her, according to her, and say, we are so sorry that we were forced to record this, right?
Wow.
So there are lots of examples of these women being dehumanized. And as someone who watched the show for several seasons and being a participant in it, right? And so I think that there is an ownership that we all have to take in this, because if we weren't watching it, then the show wouldn't be doing the things that they were doing, right?
Yeah. It's ratings. Yeah.
Correct. And so I think that there is a place for us in terms of the viewers taking some ownership in this, even if you don't know all of the behind the scenes stuff, but just, being so engaged in these scenes where these girls are struggling, they're crying, they're hurt, they're whatever, and seeing it as entertainment. We have to step out of ourselves and look at it as, what if this was my daughter? What if this was, someone that I knew and loved? Would my reaction to what I'm seeing on TV be the same?
Got you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because, we're also in National Eating Disorders Week, right? I think it's very appropriate that, we talk about it, because a lot of the women, while they were still on the show, developed eating disorders, and everybody knew about it. And some of these women are still struggling with eating disorders today.
And they're not even models.
And they're not models. They never got contracts, right? People don't really know who they are. And so I think that as Black people, sometimes we don't think that Black people have eating disorders.
Right.
And that's just not the case.
That's not the case.
Whether you're trying to be a model or you're not trying to be a model. So, yeah. We will definitely talk a lot more about this documentary, and plus it'll give you all an opportunity to watch it and unpack it, so that when we come back next week for our show, we can dive a lot deeper into it. But there was a lot there. Tyra's catching a lot of backlash for, and that's just the things I brought up: the eating disorders, the sexual assault. There's just a few things that come out during this documentary. But what are your thoughts about Tyra Banks as the face of this show and how, as a Black community, how we're supposed to even think about her and her place and her actions over those seasons when it was on?
That's a long time, because even if we're talking about back then where like a season was like most of the year.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we talking about like 18 years. We're not talking about a season where they went off after 8 episodes and came back, right? So we're talking about a long time, almost two decades worth of a time span of knowing these things are going on. My thoughts are multifaceted. Not to be a conspiracy theorist, but, my first thought is this country has a history of trying to tear down and expose Black people for misconduct. I don't want to call it anything but what it is. But why aren't we doing an expose on the modeling industry?
That's a good point.
And what those people, are forced to do, right? It used to be a running joke, like models look like teenage boys. Well, where's the expose on that before we became affirming of plus size models and models with vitiligo and dark skinned models? You know what I mean? So that's an issue for me. When we go back to critical thinking, as those of us with no money would say, all money ain't good money.
That's right.
Right? What are we willing to do for fame and fortune? And our role being complicit with, for lack of a better word, the destruction of other people, other humans, but especially our own. I didn't really watch the show, but one of the things I do remember was when Eva Marcel was on there and she was crying a whole lot. I might have watched that season or a few episodes from that. And just in that moment, I just recall feeling a demeaning atmosphere, right? Not of necessarily building up, but tearing down everything about these women, right? You and I talked offline and you were telling me about somebody's gap had to be closed. And then later on, somebody's gap was widened. It's like,
forced dental procedures.
Forced dental procedures. Of course,
terrible.
we know hair, bringing up eating disorders, how they walked. That's another thing, right? Clickbait that I saw was, what's her name? Miss J?
Miss J.
Miss J taught Tyra Banks how to walk and others on the show how to walk in a model fashion. And now they are impaired because of a stroke they had. And allegedly, Tyra Banks hasn't even reached out to them. Which is a whole nother conversation about how we keep in touch with people, right? So it doesn't have to be anything nefarious as why she hasn't reached out. Maybe they just hadn't spoken, in 30 years because of other reasons. That's not just total neglect. And we have seasons in our lives where we lose touch with people,
right?
And we aren't demonized for it. So, yeah, my thoughts are multifaceted. I'm sorry that this happened to these young women. I'm sorry that a lot of things happen to young women. And I'm sorry that even though Netflix is doing this expose, it's still another level of exploitation of these women's pain. And the reliving of the trauma now in front of everybody. A lot of these women probably have gone on and their mothers and grandmothers and wives and, working in corporate America. And now their faces are plastered all over the world on Netflix. And so they're having to be subjected to people questioning not just what happened to them, but their life choices and that they indulged or subjected themselves and engaged in all of this. And so I think that adds another level of grief. And then something in me is uncomfortable as you're recounting some of what you watched, but also all the people, millions of people who will watch this and experience vicarious grief. What do you do with that?
What do you do with that? Yeah, because I had to sit with it. I had to say, I watched several seasons of this and love the show. And I think it's the same thing that we have to be honest about when we think about R. Kelly, right? I probably had all of R. Kelly CDs. And yes, the gossip. And we didn't have social media back then, but you heard the gossip. You heard that he was engaged with young girls. You heard comments about, his relationship with Aaliyah, right? You knew it. You heard it. Yet, because we were so entranced by his music, we were like, oh, okay, whatever, nothing's come out in the court or whatever. So, it's just gossip. But we know in our communities, if there's smoke,
right,
there's some fire there too.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We have to own that. Same thing with Diddy, right? We've heard stories.
Yep.
And
For
we had
years.
social media, right? And so there were all these things that have been coming out, but yet we still support it. And I think that, in our communities, we have this tendency to want to support Black folks who are on top, but we can't support Black folks who are on top at any cost, right?
Correct.
Because it could be any of us, any of our loved ones in those situations and exposed to that behavior. And it would be mortifying to our families and our loved ones, and it's not okay. And so we have to, I think, take some ownership of ourselves, our own behaviors, our own purchases, our own likes, subscribes, shares, right? So that we can make sure that we are really supporting the folks that we need to be supporting, but then also holding people accountable for their actions individually, as well as how their actions might impact the community as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, as people of color, it's not fair, but it is what it is, that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard, especially when it comes to how we treat our own people, because we already know that industry, empire, corporations are not going to look out for what's best for us. So when we are in those spaces and we have a voice, we ought to be protective of our people, because we know that very few people are going to be looking out for us folks, as the country people would say.
It's all accountability, right? Yeah. So as Black people, we can't be calling for other folk to be holding folks accountable when we won't hold ourselves and our folk accountable either.
Exactly. So unfortunate, but like you said, we'll have to talk about it a little bit more. So I'm looking forward to that talk next week as well.
All right. That's it for today's episode. Don't forget that we'll be back next week for an extended conversation on the America's Next Top Model documentary, but also we're going to dive a little bit deeper into National Autoimmune Awareness Month. So there's lots of autoimmune issues that impact the Black community. So we will be talking about that for sure.
It's going to be a good one. Make sure you tune in for that one as well. We want to thank you, all of our supporters who have been liking and sharing and listening and providing feedback. We definitely want to hear from you in a formal context. We know you're going to have questions and comments, especially about this week's episode. So when you do, please send an email or even a voice note to us at podcast@enjoylifemoreabundantly.com.
Or you can visit enjoylifemoreabundantly.com/podcast to send us your question or comment.
All right, fam. Well, that's it for today's episode. If this conversation helped you, we ask that you share it with somebody you love. Make sure that you subscribe to it. Make sure that you like it. Please and thank you. Please and thank you.
Please and thank you.
Until then,
enjoy life.
And life more abundantly.
Cheers.
Cheers.